Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here, and today we have some prospective deck lists that we're building with some of the new cards that were teased, and we'll be releasing actually tonight as I record this video in the Extradimensional Crisis set, I believe is what this set's called. I've just been calling it ED Crisis. Now, we don't have the full set release yet. In fact, we probably should get that full set release right at the end of the night tonight, right before the set releases is when things typically get like released or data mined. So stay tuned because like late tonight or early tomorrow morning, you should get a full set review of ED Crisis. But in this video, we're going to just utilize the cards that were given in the teaser trailer last week, and then we're going to build some perspective deck lists based around, you know, what those cards are and what's currently available in the format. So yeah, hopefully this video is somewhat interesting. Of course, the deck lists are subject to change. I know whenever I make these videos, people are like, oh, why are you making, you know, deck lists when we don't have all of the cards? I always say this is just to give us like a general understanding of maybe how we can utilize the cards. The 20 card lists that we're going to be showing in this video aren't going to be concrete. They will change a little bit, but it's the general ideas, it's the general concepts and strategies and ideas on how we can utilize the Pokemon is what's important, and I think what could be helpful for a video like this. And yeah, again, we have one day until the set releases, so we had to make something for YouTube. But anyway, guys, let's get right into it. So don't forget to like the channel and subscribe. I always say like the channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. I say that every single time. I'm super excited for the set to come out, but we're gonna have a ton of content coming in the next few days. So yeah, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button and maybe liking this video if you like the video. Okay, let's get right into it. So the first deck list that we're gonna take a look at, and the first couple of decks actually are going to be, oh, by the way, before we get into it, we are on PokemonMeta.com. Link will be down in the description below. Typically for these types of videos, I use Pokemon Meta because they update their deck builder with images of the new cards, which is nice because then we can kind of just use their deck builder to, of course, build decks. So that's what we're doing in today's video. We're on PokemonMeta.com. The first couple of decks that we are going to be taking a look at are Guzzlord decks, because Guzzlord is certainly one of the Pokemon I think a lot of people are the most, I guess, interested in or excited excited about, I should say. It's a really, really strong Pokemon. I will perhaps, I don't think we can kind of zoom in on the cards themselves, but if you don't know what the cards do, then you can go check out our video a couple of days ago where we reviewed all of these cards, but I'll go ahead and tell you. I might do some editing and put the cards up on the screen, but for the most part, you guys probably understand or already know what these new cards do, and if you don't, go watch the other video. But Guzzlord's really strong. Dark-type Pokemon, basic EX, 170 HP, and it's got two different attacks, but the first attack there is kind of the Grindcore, I believe is what it's called. This like the primary attack in which I believe Guzzlord will see play. 2 colorless energy. It only does 30 damage, but it effectively is a Team Rocket Grunt in the form of an attack that does 30 damage. Colorless energy in this Pokemon's attack cost, so we can play it in a variety of different ways. The deck list that we're going to be taking a look at right here that's on the screen is going to be playing Psychic Energies, and we're just basically playing it with Giratina EX. Now, I know some people have definitely been talking about like 16 Trainer Giratina and Guzzlord. The reality is that any deck that plays Giratina is going to be somewhat good, and it always is going to have the potential. This is going to be kind of a control, sort of a kind of a stall-based, you know, Giratina deck list. Giratina is a really strong Pokemon. I think the way that this deck will play is that we Broken Space Bellow and attach a couple of turns to Giratina, and then we set up our Guzzlord, or maybe we just set up the Guzzlord first, and then we kind of start manually attaching to Giratina. Guzzlord should be able to stall pretty effectively while we get Giratina set up, and the 30 damage from Guzzlord plus whatever damage we're doing with Giratina, which is probably also 130, adds up to be enough to typically KO most Pokemon in the format. So that's kind of the true combination. And then after Guzzlord goes down, we could even just play our 1 copy of Lusamine, go into a second Guzzlord if we really wanted to, but most of the time we're kind of just hoping to lead off with Guzzlord, utilize it to stall our opponent, maybe whittle down our opponent a little bit, and then go into Giratina and kind of finish off the game. We are playing 2 copies of Celesteela, which isn't a great Pokemon in its own right, but it does have a really strong ability, which allows you to swap your active Ultra Beast for one of your bench Ultra Beasts. This could allow us to basically go into Celesteela for some matchups if we needed a non-EX attacker. That's really why we're playing Celesteela. If we aren't playing it, we just lose to Oricorio. So I think 2 copies of Celesteela is fine. It's a low-impact Pokemon because, truthfully, if you do lead off with Celesteela, you can just free retreat and swap into your Guzzlord that's on the bench for free, right, with Celesteela's ability, because it works for itself. So that's a good reason why we're playing Celesteela, mainly for the Oricorio matchup. And theoretically, in the head-to-head matchup against Oricorio, if we can get 3 energies on the Celesteela, then yeah, we're just going to be one-hit KOing Oricorios. It is a coin flip, but theoretically, we have 120 HP with Giant Cape in Pokemon Center Lady. We're living a couple of turns and attacks from Oricorio, plus we have 2 Celesteela, so and Lucamine, so we should be able to basically just auto beat Oricorio with Celesteela itself. But yeah, it's basically a Pokemon that we can lead off with, maybe soak up an attack or two, and then go into Guzzlord while we get set up. So it's pretty strong in that respect. Also, at the same time, Guzzlord just has a ton of HP, so if we lead with it, it can sit in the active spot for quite some time. And we are playing Rocky Helmets. We're playing Team Rocket Grunts and a couple copy of Marses with Guzma, Pokemon Center Lady. Only 1 Pokeball on this list, although that's definitely a mistake. We should probably swap that out for another card. I don't know. I don't know why there's only 1 Pokeball in the list. I kind of do want to run Giant Cape, so I'm actually going to cut a Rocky Helmet. And let's just add a second Pokeball. That makes a little bit more sense. I think that Giant Cape is kind of needed in Giratina decks. There's too many breakpoints for Giratina where if you come in and you attack, you kind of get KO'd. So we're a little bit reliant on getting that Giant Cape on Giratina, but we can also attach it to whatever we need to. Lucamine as well to set up the second Celesteela in an Oricorio matchup, or even a second Guzzlord if kind of need be. Now, the one thing I will say is that we're never able to use the Tyrannical Hole attack from Guzzlord EX because it takes Dark Energy. So this is a deck list that really just kind of utilizes Guzzlord to stall, and I think that Guzzlord as a Pokemon is kind of underrated. I think a lot of people think it's going to be really strong, but some people don't think it'll be strong. You got to understand that, like, discarding all of the energies from your opponent's Pokemon is crazy. Like, it's just fundamentally insane. Theoretically, if you get a little bit lucky on your coin flips, plus we're also playing Team Rocket Grunt itself, and then you can basically grunt twice in 1 turn, effectively, you can kind of keep all of the energies off your opponent's Pokemon for quite some time. And if that Pokemon that's in the active position has a retreat cost of 2 or more, then if they're not playing Leaf or anything like that, you could just kind of trap a Pokemon in the active spot, like, indefinitely, and then they're really never able to get out, and it's basically a free KO. So I think that Guzzlord's going to be really strong, and I think it's probably going to force a lot of people to play Leaf in their deck, but not a lot of decks are playing Leaf right now. But anyway, it's Giratina, it's Guzzlord. They kind of work in conjunction with each other, similar to how we were playing Giratina and Darkrai, except, you know, it's sort of, it's not necessarily as good in terms of you can set up 2 Pokemon at the same time. Guzzlord really isn't as strong of an attacking Pokemon as Darkrai is, and in that deck, of course, you play Dark Energies, and of course, you could maybe just fit Guzzlord in a Darktina deck as well, but I specifically think if we're playing Guzzlord, we probably want to pair it with Celesteela, that way we could beat Oricorio, and Giratina is just a really strong partner. So this is going to be the first deck list that we're showcasing with Guzzlord. It's not necessarily the deck that I'm most excited about, and again, you know, things are going to change around a lot, so this is probably as far as, you know, the new decks go, one of the more boring decks or least exciting decks. Oh, it's like Guzzlord, you just pair it with Giratina. It's probably going to be pretty good. I don't know. We'll have to see if Guzzlord really ends up being meta. I think Grass is still going to be really good. Guzzlord will get absolutely bodied by a Meowscarada as long as you just don't, you know, unless you flip heads a bunch of times with you know, Grindcore and Team Rocket Grunts. So, I mean, that is technically a possibility, but theoretically, you should do fairly decent. I mean, Celesteela, though, can kind of deal with a Meowscarada, right? With Giant Cape, they don't even 2-hit KO us, and then we can potentially 2-hit KO them. We just got to get a bit lucky on the coin flip. So, theoretically speaking, the deck list can beat Meowscarada, especially if we get, like, just 1 attack off with Guzzlord, and then we can go into Giratina. So, there are some possibilities. But anyway, here is Giratina and Guzzlord. It's not necessarily the deck I'm most excited about, but let's take a look at some other Guzzlord decks that I'm a little bit more interested in talking about. This one is going to be Guzzlord paired with the Dark Arceus combination that we've seen in the format right now, and that is going to be with the Crobat, the Cunning Link Crobat and Arceus. The whole idea with this deck is that since we're actually playing Dark Energies, we can just use Guzzlord as a typical attacking Pokemon. Really what we want to do with this deck is lead with Guzzlord and then just basically attach to it indefinitely, right? We want to get Arceus on our bench, maybe get a Crobat or 2 on our bench, and then the damage really kind of racks up, right? Only 30 damage from Guzzlord, but again, it is going to extend the game, and you are going to kind of trap in your opponent's active Pokemon as long as they don't have, like, you know, a 1 energy attack cost or whatever like that. And then the 30 damage plus the 30 that we're also doing from Crobat is 60 per turn, so it actually adds up to be a decent amount of damage. And then what we can do is decide to attach those additional Dark Energies to Guzzlord in the active to then attack with Tyrannical Hole, or we can just commit those energies after we get 2 onto Guzzlord to an Arceus, and Arceus can be our backup attacker. The cool thing about this deck list as well is that we also have a second Guzzlord. So if need be, we can potentially just go Guzzlord into Guzzlord and then just kind of keep up the Crobat shenanigans if we're really in a stalling position. But Arceus is a pretty strong Pokemon on the back line. By, you know, our 5th turn going second, we should be able to set up, you know, Arceus completely, and hopefully hopefully Guzzlord lives that long. We could also lead with Crobat or attack with Crobat against Oricorio. So I think this is going to be a really, really strong deck. I think it probably might even be better than the Giratina variant. And it really just kind of comes down to how common grass is in the format. I think that Guzzlord is just going to be a really, really powerful Pokemon. I think people are kind of underrating it a little bit. We're not playing Team Rocket Grunt in this deck, but we are a little bit more focused on just kind of being an actual attacking deck and not so much like a stall deck. So no Team Rocket Grunt in here, but we are playing one copy of Leaf in case we do lead off with Arceus. We've got Mars, we've got Cyrus, we've got Giant Cape, 1 Pokecom, 2 Rare Candies, Guzma, all of the standard stuff that we typically see in decks in the format right now. And I think that this is going to be a really strong variant. I think that Dark Arceus is one of the top decks of the format right now. We've seen people pair it with Carnivine, with Grass Energies. We've seen people play it with Darkrai and Giratina with Dark Energies. I think this might be kind of the new variant for it. And again, kind of sneaking Guzzlord pretty properly into an archetype that is already one of the strongest archetypes in the game right now. And like I said, because of Crobat, we should have a totally fine matchup against Oricorio. And I think that Guzzlord is just going to be a really, really funny Pokemon. It's going to be very frustrating for sure. You're going to see a lot of Guzzlord decks. And what it probably will do, if Guzzlord sees enough play and it is a strong enough Pokemon in the metagame, it's probably going to force a lot of these decks to have low attack cost and low retreat cost Pokemon. We do have some things like that, but of course, like even if your attack cost is 2 energies, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get 2 energies on your Pokemon, right? Because all they have to do is get a little bit lucky with their their coin flips and their energy discards, and then all of a sudden you just don't have a way to get out of the active spot. So it might be one of those scenarios where you're kind of hopeful to just stack up a bunch of energies, maybe on like your benched Decidueye or Meowscarada or something like that, and then you bring it in and hope that your opponent just kind of misses a couple of coin flips early on. But yeah, I think Guzzlord's gonna be really strong. I think that pairing it with Crobat and Arceus makes a little bit more sense than Giratina, but as we all know, Giratina is such a good Pokemon in its own right that when you pair it with anything, it's gonna make that deck pretty strong. In my mind, I think this is a little bit more exciting, makes a little bit more sense in my mind. And if I'm really thinking about ways we can play Guzzlord, and again, Guzzlord isn't the only Pokemon from this set. It's just sort of the Pokemon that I wanted to cover first of all, because it is very flexible and there's a lot of different ways to play it. So I wanted to showcase a couple of decks utilizing Guzzlord, but we also probably will get a couple of other EX Pokemon that we've yet to see yet from the release trailer. So keep that in mind. There might be like a super broken EX Ultra Beast that we haven't seen yet, or not even an Ultra Beast. That could be really, really good. That's not Guzzlord or any of the Pokemon we've seen yet. But anyway, here's one idea. Dark Arceus, we all know it. Guzzlord's gonna fit pretty well into that deck list. By the way, comment below if there's something that we didn't talk about in this video that you think is going to be really good. I would love to hear your opinions. Again, things are subject to change, so it's all subjective, and we're just sort of theory crafting right now. And of course, we don't have the full set in the full context, but just some general early ideas to get sort of the gears turning in our head. Okay. Next up, let's take a look at one deck that I'm actually really excited to try to play. I don't know exactly how good it'll work, but I think it actually could be pretty funny. And that's going to be Guzzlord with Greninja. So this might not be something that a lot of people had in mind. Guzzlord, of course, does have the 2 energy in its first attack that are colorless. So we can play water energies in this deck. We can utilize some water support cards like Irida to do some extra healing on this crazy HP amount. Guzzlord EX, again, pairing it with Celesteela, allowing us to shuffle between Guzzlords or even into Celesteela if we need to. But the whole idea with this deck is basically control. So this is going to be like a Guzzlord full control deck where we're not playing Team Rocket Grunt, but what we are playing are 2 copies of Cyrus and Greninja. And what this is going to allow us to do is effectively lead off with Guzzlord, start grind coring, discarding energies, doing some chip damage, while we also do chip damage with Greninja. But what we're able to do with the Greninja Cyrus combo is choose which Pokemon we want to bring in. So theoretically, if we're going second and we get Greninja out early enough and we have those Cyruses in our hand, we can kind of lock down our opponent from setting up really any Pokemon on their board. You're no longer able to kind of set up a bench Pokemon and then bring it in. We can kind of target it with Greninja, play Cyrus, bring it up, and then attack with Grindcore and discard the energy. So that's what this deck list is realistically all about. The extra damage from Water Shuriken should add up. And again, against Oricorio, we can attack with Celesteela. We can also just attack with Greninja itself. But most of the time, this deck is kind of going to be all about just setting up Guzzlord. We're not playing Lusamine because theoretically, like, Guzzlord will only ever attack for 2 energy. So you don't really need that Lusamine effect to kind of, do our thing with Guzzlord because it's such a low energy attack cost. Anyway, you could slot in 1 copy of it, but I think Irida might be a little bit better to potentially just heal up multiple Pokemon. Now we don't have, or I should say we do have a way to just swap between Guzzlords really easily with Celesteela, right? So your typical board state, I think, that you want to achieve here is maybe like 1 Greninja, 1 Celesteela, and then a couple of Guzzlord on your bench. Or what we could do is maybe just go double Greninja Guzzlord and kind of just completely ride out, maybe finish the game with Greninja. Again, this is a deck that's going to be a bit reliant on flipping the coins and discarding the energies with Grindcore, but we have enough HP with Guzzlord. We are playing Rocky Helmet, we're playing Irida, we have Guzzlord, we have Cyrus, so we can kind of just target and whittle down whatever Pokemon that we want. There are certain scenarios where, like, you got to understand that there's a lot of decks in the format, even right now, and I think next format, that are going to have Pokemon on the bench that your opponent doesn't really want to, like, actually utilize. They just want to kind of have on the bench. And that's really where this deck list kind of comes in. Like, imagine if you're playing one of those Arceus decks where, you know, they maybe lead with Carnivine, or they're leading with whatever, and they have like a Giratina on their bench or an Arceus on their bench that they don't really want in the active spot. But what we can do is just kind of Greninja them, ping them with a Water Shuriken, bring them up, and then just lock them in the active spot and whittle them down until they get KO'd, right? And Pokemon like Arceus are a great example of that. They have 2 energies in their retreat cost. They can't attack unless they have 3 energies attached. So if an Arceus is in the active spot facing down a Guzzlord, it probably isn't going to be able to do anything until it gets KO'd. And that's kind of the whole idea here. Again, Guzzlord's going to be definitely one of those high roll Pokemon where you're going to have to flip, you know, heads on the coin flips. But if you do, it really is going to be just a hilarious card to deal with. So yeah, here it is with Greninja and Celesteela and Cyrus. Full control kind of lockdown Guzzlord deck that I think is actually going to be pretty fun to deal with. And again, we're playing water energy, so we can't heal with Irida. You could even play 2 copies of Irida if you really wanted to. You could cut the Giant Cape, you could cut the Guzma maybe. But 1 Pokecom, 2 Rare Candy, 2 Pokeball, 2 Research, I think is all kind of correct. You could even play 1 less Celesteela. The thing is, like, Celesteela isn't like a low impact Pokemon, so it's like, or it is a low impact Pokemon. So you could play 2 copies of it. If you lead with it, it's like whatever, right? Because it's just a free retreat into your Guzzlord. So theoretically speaking, I think it's actually a bit better to play multiple copies of Celesteela, especially with Oricorio's probably still being common in the format. You're probably going to want to have a couple of them to theoretically just beat the Oricorio matchup. So that's something to keep in mind for sure. I do think Celesteela is weak to Electric. I could be wrong about that. It might not be, but I kind of think it might be. So yeah, anyway, there you go. Okay, so yeah, that's gonna be the Greninja Guzzlord deck. We've got one more Guzzlord deck to take a look at, and then we'll kind of move off of the Guzzlord decks. Again, we haven't had a full list of Pokemon, but this is going to be a deck list that is incorporating the new Nihilego, which increases the damage that your opponent takes from poison every turn. Now, there are a lot of other poison Pokemon. I know some people are looking at this list and they're thinking, like, what about Naganadel, which does like 40 damage. It's a stage 1 Pokemon, 100 HP. Does 40 damage, 1 energy, and it poisons. Now, that is certainly a fine Pokemon. I don't think it's a bad Pokemon whatsoever, but I just don't really understand why we would play that other than just playing Guzzlord, right? We can play Dark Energies in the stack, we can attack with all of our Pokemon, and we can just play Poison Barb Guzzlord, right? And I think that theoretically speaking, Poison Barb on a Guzzlord is just gonna be better than Naganadel. It's a basic Pokemon. All of our Pokemon are Ultra Beasts, so we can kind of shuffle between them all no matter how we want to. As long as Celesteela is on our bench, we can utilize Lusamine to kind of go into multiple Pokemon at the same time. We are able to just play the Guzzlord Team Rocket Grunt combination, so with the poison damage, it's kind of similar, honestly, to the Greninja deck and to the Crobat deck, where we're kind of adding additional damage to that small amount of damage that Guzzlord is doing. But theoretically speaking, this is a deck that can kind of beat Oricorio at the same time, but also, again, all you have to do is get a little bit lucky on the coin flips, and then we're doing a lot of damage, right? A Guzzlord in the active, you know, a Celesteela on the bench, maybe 2 Nihilegos on our bench. All of a sudden, we're doing, 60 damage per turn with the Poison Tick, right? So that's pretty significant if you really think about how much damage we're doing while we're discarding the energies with Team Rocket Grunt. So similar to the other Guzzlord decks, I think that if we're building Guzzlord, we have to build it around another strategy that's either kind of buffing the damage output, or we're kind of putting it just with that other strong Pokemon that we're going to be setting up in the meantime while Guzzlord kind of stalls. That's sort of the whole idea. I think with Guzzlord, it's going to be kind of similar, honestly, to how Bayonet functions in the format right now. I think it's just going to be a little bit more powerful. Bayonet, of course, is guaranteed, where it's a different effect. So it completely shuts off your ability to accelerate energies or attach energies to your active Pokemon. But Guzzlord will kind of, hopefully, as long as we're flipping coins effectively, will do the same thing. It'll just keep removing energy. So Bayonet's a little bit better for locking down those Pokemon that don't have any energy in their attack cost or anything like that. But I do actually think that Guzzlord is still going to be affecting the metagame and affecting the board state in a similar way that Bayonet will. So anyway, here's another Guzzlord deck. This is like 20 minutes of Guzzlord decks, but I swear we'll move on. I just wanted to cover them because Guzzlord is a super fun Pokemon, and I think you can play it a lot of different ways. If there's another way that you think you could play Guzzlord that I'm not thinking about right now, comment it down below, and definitely let me know. I would love to hear your guys' ideas for sure. And like I said, the full set is coming out probably tonight, so I'm gonna have a video reviewing the full set, and there's gonna be more archetypes and more deck ideas after that kind of happens. So all right, next up, let's take a look at Buzzwole. So Buzzwole is certainly a very, very interesting card. This is something that I think a lot of people thought, or initially thought when they saw it, was a really, really bad card, but Buzzwole isn't a bad card whatsoever. In fact, it's actually quite a good card when you take a look at all of the other support cards that we have with it. That being, of course, all of the grass type support that's available to us in Erica's and Leaf Cape. Leaf Cape's going to bring Buzzwole up to 170 HP, and Erica can heal 50 damage from it. So it's going to have a lot of staying power, and its attacks are a little bit underwhelming. It can punch for 30 damage for 2 colorless, and then it can do Big Beat, which is 120 for 3 energies, but then you can't use Big Beat next turn. So the whole idea with this deck is basically allowing us to Big Beat multiple times in a row. That's really what it's all about. Now, Lusamine only works, again, if your opponent has taken a prize already. So, theoretically speaking, we can't just sort of retreat out of a Buzzwole and then Lusamine those energies to our other Buzzwole as long as our opponent hasn't taken a prize yet. So, it's not as flexible as maybe we would want it to be, but theoretically speaking, if we go into Pheromosa and we attack, maybe we can kind of just keep Pheromosa going until it gets KO'd, and then our opponent has, of course, 1 point taken, and then we can go into Buzzwole, right? Or we can just lead off with Celesteela, attach 3 energies to it, and maybe get an attack off or 2, and then when Celesteela goes down, then we can go into our Buzzwole, set it up in 1 turn with Lusamine, and then attack, and then, of course, if we really needed to, we could just retreat into another Buzzwole, Lusamine, and then kind of continue that kind of formulation there. One thing we can also do is, if we wanted to attack again with Buzzwole, again, only if our opponent has taken a prize already, is to basically, retreat into, or not retreat, but Celesteela into like Pheromosa and then just manually retreat. So we can double pivot a lot of different ways with this deck. We even have 1 copy of Lima in this deck list, which is going to allow us to pick up and scoop up a Celesteela. So theoretically, you could use Celesteela's Ultra Thruster's ability, go into your Buzzwole, or move out of your active spot. If you have Buzzwole in the active, go into your Celesteela, scoop it up, and then, there you go. Also, if you have 2 Celesteela on your bench, we should be able to use Ultra Thrusters twice. So theoretically speaking, all of the different combinations of basically double pivots that we have in this deck list should allow us to just attack with Buzzwole time and time again. Lusamine can kind of work as long as your opponent has taken 1 prize already, but Lusamine is specifically kind of here just to set up the second Buzzwole after it gets KO'd. That's sort of the main idea, is that even if Buzzwole goes down, we can kind of just go into the second one really easily. And honestly, we have Pheromosa, we have Celesteela, but I think the best strategy for this deck, for the most part, is probably just going to be going into Buzzwole and then, just setting up and attacking with it, right? Because if you have 2 Celesteela, then our opponent, we can double pivot anyway. So there's a lot of different scenarios, but I think the 120, being able to do it every turn effectively, if we have all of the cards we need to make that combo work, is going to be pretty strong, especially on a basic Pokemon that's going to be really consistent to get out. And 170 HP with Erica's and stuff, it's going to be honestly quite strong. We have 1 Cyrus and 1 Mars and 1 Sabrina, 1 Guzma, and then 1 Lima. So again, it's a lot of kind of strange cards thrown in that maybe aren't going to provide too much value, but might be worth running. Maybe we kind of cut one of these trainer cards. Maybe we just play a second Pheromosa. Maybe we play, maybe a second Cyrus. One thing I will say is that Pheromosa is a card that I think a lot of people are underrating. Pheromosa is, we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next deck that we'll take a look at, which is a little bit more centered around Pheromosa, but honestly, I think that Pheromosa might be one of the better cards to come out in the set. 70 HP basic grass Pokemon, retreat cost of 1, attack cost of 1, and then it's got Jump Blues. It does 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and then 20 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That's a lot better than maybe people think it is at face value. I think you could just play like 2 Pheromosa in a variety of different grass decks, and then play 2 copies of Cyrus. And what it's going to allow you to do is not only do like really valuable chip damage to a variety of different Pokemon in the first couple of turns, it's really fast paced, but it's going to allow you to do a lot of control, right? So like theoretically speaking, if your opponent has like a full board state, if they bench a bunch of Pokemon that they don't really aren't really trying to use until maybe late in the game, we can attack with Pheromosa and then just bring up one of those bench Pokemon with Cyrus and then continue to do damage to whatever bench Pokemon that we want, right? So the idea with Pheromosa and Cyrus is that it's actually not only really valuable chip damage, but it's actually a lot of control, like actual lockdown control early in the game. There's so many Pokemon. Like I said, that Arceus example is a big one, where Arceus is kind of useless until like turn 4 or 5 in those Arceus decks. So if we can just attack with Pheromosa, bring up the Arceus, then it's like, what is our opponent actually going to be able to do for a couple of turns unless they have Leaf in hand, right? So it's very much a kind of control combination here. Pheromosa just works with Buzzwole in general. I think it's a fairly good Pokemon. It's also an Ultra Beast. with a retreat cost of 1, so it should allow us to double pivot pretty effectively if we already have 3 energies on Buzzwole. So it can work in that sense, but also I think just playing Pheromosa and Cyrus, you could maybe even cut Sabrina for a second Cyrus. Maybe we could even cut like Guzma for like a second Pheromosa like this. And then this deck list is also a little bit more control aspect, where it's like we're even a little bit more stronger in the early game, whether we're leading with Celesteela because we can pivot into Pheromosa, or we just lead with Pheromosa. And then if we have a Cyrus early on, we can even Leaf Cape to Pheromosa, bring it to 100 HP, live a couple attacks, you know, kind of just face down things like Skarmory or even Carnivine with Erika's. So I think a strategy like this could be even also really, really effective. Again, you can change around the deck lists a lot. You don't even need to run Lima, honestly. You could honestly just run like, I don't even know, like you could also just kind of put Sabrina in here, or I'm trying to think of like another card that might be kind of useful. You could honestly play like a Pokemon Center Lady in here for healing. You could even play like a copy of Red just to do maybe some additional damage. That 120 could be a little bit awkward with Buzzwole, but with Red, that's 140 with a Pheromosa attack, that 20 damage as well. That's 160. That's enough to KO a lot of Pokemon. So a lot of different ways that we can kind of build this deck list, but I think that the core Buzzwole strategy is a lot better than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for. So I'm actually really excited to test it. I don't know, and again, there's a couple of different grass decks that we're actually going to take a look at in this video, and I don't know if any of them are going to end up being better than just sort of the Meowscarada deck that's in the format right now. So you got to keep that in mind. Meowscarada is phenomenal, and it is exceptionally good. There are fire decks that do see play. Buzzwole, even with Leaf Cape, is going to get absolutely bodied by a Stoke Charizard, so there are certainly counterplays to all of the decks that we're showcasing here, but honestly, if you take a look at the metagame right now, there's counterplay to all of the top decks. One thing that I have tried to keep in mind when I'm building all of these new decks is they match up against Oricorio. I think that's certainly going to be a very, very important thing to keep in mind, because Oricorio will still definitely be pretty relevant. But anyway, yeah, here is sort of just like a basic rendition of Buzzwole. Once we get the full set release, there might be other good cards that we can pair with Buzzwole, but I think that the core strategy is actually a lot better than people think it is. It's going to be actually quite a strong deck, and I wouldn't be surprised if a deck list like this ended up just sort of being really, really strong in the format coming up. Okay, next up, let's take a look at, speaking of Oricorio, let's take a look at a Tapu Koko deck that I kind of spun together. Again, I didn't really spend too much time theory crafting with Tapu Koko because I don't actually think it's going to be that good of a Pokemon. However, I do think it has the potential to be a little bit better than people maybe initially think it will be. Here's the thing with Tapu Koko is that it's going to be pretty good against a lot of these slower ramp decks that are still fairly common in the format. Now, there are those stage 2 decks that can just rare candy on their second turn and absolutely blow you away. Tapu Koko is not going to enjoy that whatsoever, but theoretically speaking, Tapu Koko, if we're going second, can do 20 damage on that first turn and then do 90 damage on your second turn, going second. And that is quite strong. That's enough to just kind of KO a bunch of basic Pokemon. So in a scenario where our opponent just doesn't maybe draw, that rare candy combination in some of those stage 2 decks, Tapu Koko is consistent and fast-paced enough to where it can kind of just win those matchups. And again, Electric type is in a really interesting spot because I think if you're playing Electric type energies in your deck and Electric type Pokemon, you should probably just play Oricorio, because Oricorio is going to auto-win you a variety of different matchups in some respects as well. I did want to incorporate the new Zeraora. I think this card is also kind of bad. It's kind of a trap card, but theoretically, Zeraora is going to allow us to maybe get Tapu Koko online if we're going first. Now, what I mean by that is, of course, Tapu Koko isn't going to be able to, attack on your first turn no matter what, because what Zeraora does is it allows you to accelerate an energy to it at the end of your first turn if Zeraora is in play. Now, that effect seems okay, but it's realistically not that great of an effect. But what it does mean is that whether Zeraora is in the active spot or on the bench, we can either attack with Zeraora on our second turn going first, or we can even attack with Oricorio on our second turn going first if we, of course, have Dawn in our hand. So that's really what this deck list is all about. It's just a Oricorio deck that has some aggressive Electric-type options. I think that Tapu Koko EX is just kind of the better version of Pikachu EX in that sense. Now, you could just play like Pachirisu EX, which didn't see any play of this past format, and I think Tapu Koko might be a little bit better than Pachirisu, but going second, it's going to be incredibly strong, and I think that Tapu Koko is going to be fairly decent against some of those slower ramp decks that don't really come online until turn 3 or turn 4. So I don't know. I mean, I think Tapu Koko is maybe a little bit better than people give it credit for. I don't really think that this deck's going to see all that much play. Honestly, I think that Magnezone might even be a better partner for Oricorio, or even just playing the Greninja combination with Oricorio might also still be better. But here you go. Again, to me, Tapu Koko definitely seems like a Pokemon that's probably going to get some additional support once we see the full set release. So keep that in mind. The entire idea of Tapu Koko might change. It might actually end up being one of the most most insane Pokemon that we've seen so far. And Zeraora is also an interesting Pokemon in the sense that, technically speaking, what we could do is pair Zeraora up with Tapu Koko and maybe also Pachirisu. So theoretically, in a situation where we lead Pachirisu and then we have Zeraora on our bench, what we can do is attack. If we're going second, we can attack with Pachirisu, accelerate an energy to a bench Pokemon at the end of that first turn going second. We can get an additional energy onto Zeraora. Then we can retreat into that Pokemon, dawn to that Pokemon, and then attach into it. And then we have 3 energies on our second turn. So it's a pretty consistent way to get that going. Maybe Tapu Koko isn't even the best partner for that, but we certainly do have a lot of interesting energy acceleration options for the Electro-type decks, but I just don't know if any of them are going to be more worthwhile than playing Oricorio, which is kind of why I paired it with Tapu Koko here. I know it's not super creative, but I think it might end up just being the best partner for Tapu Koko. We'll have to see. Of course, Tapu Koko is a really aggressive Pokemon. It's going to be good going second, but theoretically, if we don't go second, we can just sort of do Oricorio things and hopefully win the game that way. That's what this deck's all about. Really fast-paced, really aggressive. I put a couple of copies of Red in here and X-Speed, again, just to kind of get Tapu Koko going early on, because if we don't lead with Tapu Koko, but we are going second, we can Pokeball into it, X-Speed into it, get the Plasma Hurricane attack off, do 20 damage, and the next turn we would be doing 90, but with Red, that's 110. So 110 plus 20 is technically 130. That might be enough to take some KOs as well. I don't know. We'll have to see how Tapu Koko is. To me, I think that we're missing a lot of maybe some context with this card. I think that when the full set releases, there might be some additional support or a really good partner Pokemon with Tapu Koko. We'll have to see. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with it, but I just sort of wanted to build at least some type of a deck with Tapu Koko. Next up, let's take a look, and this might be the last one, actually. Yeah, this might be the last one. This is going to be Decidueye. So again, there are some other cards that were teased, right? We had Naganadel, like I talked about, although I figured just playing Guzzlord rather was better with Poison Barb. So that was the poison version. That was the Nihilego deck. We did get Blacephalon, so Blacephalon is certainly a card. But the rest of the Pokemon that were showcased, I don't think necessarily aren't that strong. And Blacephalon, I also think could be absolutely insane. It's a Pokemon that I think maybe once the full set releases, we see like a clear combo for Blacephalon, and it can go absolutely nuts. But for right now, I don't think that we have, again, enough context to build out a Blacephalon deck, so I kind of bypassed doing that. But this deck list is going to be Pheromosa with Decidueye. This is one that I'm actually really excited about. I think that Decidueye is an incredible Pokemon. It has seen a lot of play in the format, but the deck that plays Decidueye right now, or at least of the previous format, isn't really centered around Decidueye. It is sort of the additional Pokemon that you just throw in with Meowscarada. It is kind of carried by Meowscarada in the current format. And like I said, I don't know if this particular deck or any version of grass decks are going to be better than the Meowscarada version that we have right now, because Meowscarada is just so good. But this is going to be, I think, the best way for us, at least at first glance, to play kind of a deck that is really centered around Decidueye, which again, we don't really have in the format right now. I think the only deck that was really centered around Decidueye was Lurantis Decidueye, which actually was a fairly decent deck, but just didn't see play. More people played Meowscarada in favor of it. But now I think with Pheromosa, I think that particular archetype has been upgraded and updated. Now you might be wondering, exactly what the correlation is here between Pheromosa and Decidueye. I'm sure you all already know. Pheromosa allows us to damage 2 Pokemon at the same time. 1 energy attack cost. It's a great leadoff option. And again, we can play grass energies in this deck. All grass Pokemon, we have access to Leaf Cape and Erika's. You could even squeeze in a copy of Lily like we do in Decidueye decks right now, but I don't know if it's as useful because our deck isn't exclusively stage 2 Pokemon like the Meowscarada deck is. But either way, the whole idea here is that Pheromosa should act as a better Lurantis. Now, Lurantis' attack is technically better than Pheromosa, but it is also a Stage 1 Pokemon, and Stage 1 Pokemon realistically are not very good at all in Pokemon Pocket. They take up 2 extra spots in your deck, and there's no guarantee that you're going to draw that evolution Pokemon. So in that particular deck, even if you lead with Lurantis or Fomantis, but you don't find Lurantis, then your deck just doesn't really function. Whereas with Pheromosa, you're guaranteed to get that bench damage, even though it's only damaging 1 bench Pokemon. That's really all you need. There's never a scenario where you need to KO 3 or 4 Pokemon. If you're playing Decidueye, Pheromosa is going to target, 2 Pokemon, and then you could attack again, target another Pokemon. So it's going to do basically the same thing that Lurantis does. Even though the attack is technically worse, it's going to be completely fine, and I think it's going to be a much better card than Lurantis does, but it functions very, very similarly in the deck, and now we even have 2 extra slots open in the deck list because we're not playing a Stage 1 Pokemon. So I think that's really where it kind of comes down to it. Now, one thing you might be curious about is why are we playing 2 copies of Cyrus in this particular deck, right? Can't Decidueye just do 100 damage to a damaged benched Pokemon? Decidueye can just bypass the need to play things like Cyrus or Sabrina because it can damage the bench. So can, Pheromosa, right? So why are we playing Cyrus? Again, it goes back to that control aspect. Decidueye is a stage 2 Pokemon. There's no guarantee that we're going to be able to go into Decidueye that early. So the whole idea with this deck is that Pheromosa doing early bench damage to any one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which we can choose, that allows us to bring up that bench Pokemon that maybe has a high retreat cost or isn't something that your opponent necessarily is going to want to attach energies to, and then we can kind of play a little bit of a control game early on. That Cyrus isn't there to kind of bring up a Pokemon and then attack with it or attack that Pokemon. Rather, it's just there to kind of stall the early game. And again, I think that's a really massively underrated aspect of Pheromosa. I think when you're playing 2 copies of Pheromosa and 2 Cyrus in your deck, you have the potential to just lock your opponent into a Pokemon that they don't want in the active spot. And unless they're playing Leaf, or unless that Pokemon, again, doesn't have like a high retreat cost, then they basically are stuck and they kind of waste a turn or two, or they just sort of let that active Pokemon go down. And I think that's going to be an incredibly valuable aspect of this deck list. Again, Decidueye can also just attack a benched Pokemon while that Pokemon is in the active spot. So you can bring up a Pokemon, trap it in the active, and then just KO the actual Pokemon that your opponent wants to use while it's on the bench with Decidueye. So I actually think that 2 copies of Cyrus is going to be really, really good for this deck. And I think it's something that a lot of people are maybe underrating when they kind of take a look at Pheromosa, is that control aspect, right? The ability, literally, like imagine you're playing Carnivine Arceus, right? Or Crobat Arceus, and they lead Carnivine and they bench their Zubat and they bench their Arceus and then they just start hitting you, right? We can go, all right, that's cool. I'm just going to go ahead, attack that Carnivine for 20, hit your Arceus for 20, and then next turn play Cyrus, bring up that Arceus, and now I've got like 2 more turns to just sort of set up, and you can't actually do anything because Arceus has 3 energy in its attack cost and 2 energies in its retreat cost. Yes, they can play Leaf, but not many decks play Leaf. So again, that's the scenario I keep using, but there's just a lot of scenarios like that. Maybe against Giratina and Darkrai, maybe they bench a second Darkrai. We can bring up that Darkrai, just kind of hang out for a turn, maybe even do 40 damage to the active Darkrai, and then kind of ping down their opponent's Giratina. There's so many scenarios, honestly, that I think people are underrating with Pheromosa. Again, I don't know if this particular strategy will end up being any better than the Masquerada strategy that we have right now, but I do think that it's going to be basically like Decidueye Lurantis, which was kind of a fringe meta deck before, but it's going to be a lot better, a lot more consistent. Again, we can cut 2 of those cards in the deck because we're not playing a stage 1, we're playing basics, and then we can just play 2 copies of Cyrus and put a lot of extra control down in the early game to kind of stall, honestly. Basically, that's really what it comes down to, right? Buying ourselves time to get more attacks off with Pheromosa, to do more damage, but also spend or take a little bit more time to get that Decidueye set up. And then if it is set up, we can go into it. Decidueye is incredibly strong, honestly. With Leaf Cape, it goes up to 200 HP. We have Erika's to heal. It's just incredibly good. So I think a more consistent partner with Decidueye might actually really bring this deck up to the forefront. And like I said, things like Guzzlord and a lot of other Pokemon are actually weak to grass in the format right now too. Darkrai being one of them. So I think that's also really, really relevant. Okay, that's going to kind of wrap up the video, guys. So let me know, comment below what you guys think. Hopefully maybe this video was a bit interesting to you. I'm just really excited to get our hands on these new cards. Again, just some early ideas on maybe what kind of decks you can build. However, like I said, tonight when the set releases, we're going to get the full set release. I'll do a full set review, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But truthfully speaking, I think it's still valuable to get a basic grasp or understanding of maybe some strategies that we can kind of deploy even before we get the full set release. So I know some people, listen, some people aren't even going to watch the video and they're just going to comment, oh, this video is pointless, we don't have all of the cards. And to those people I say, watch the video. And if you don't watch the video, and if you don't agree that this is going to be somewhat helpful, or maybe you haven't thought of some of the stuff yet, it's all going to be useful. And I think that any advantage you have at the early stages of a season, of a ranked season or whatever, is going to be definitely an advantage to all of those players, which is what we're all about here on the channel, is having fun, but also giving you guys maybe some sort of an advantage early on. As soon as the tournaments start and ranked battle starts and people kind of start exploring with all of the cards and the deck lists, we're going to be talking about and showcasing all of the best stuff in this new metagame as it releases. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Definitely stay tuned. It's going to be a great time. I am very, very excited. Let the crisis begin. The ED crisis, man, and we've been waiting for it. It's coming. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. All right, guys. Let's wrap it up. Comment below if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you think is going to be really good. And again, stay tuned. The full set release and the set review should be coming later tonight or tomorrow morning. And it should be a good time. So anyway, guys, peace out. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later. Hopefully. Yeah. Bye.